I am a firm believer in the idea that people can change. And no, this isn't an I think you should leave reference, I truly mean it. I myself have changed a ton over the years, and I've seen all kinds of people around me become almost like totally different individuals, for better or worse. When a movie comes along that puts the development of its main character at the centerpiece of the story, I am bound to be intrigued. Enter American History X, a 1998 drama film that I watched last year and which quickly became one of my favorites of all time. The movie's subject matter is destined to appeal to me, radical and extremist ideology and how it takes hold of normal people, as well as the prospect of said individuals undergoing a process of growth and change that may just save their lives. I had seen a clip on YouTube that had me absolutely floored with the bleak and horrific language used by Edward Norton's character Derek, his amazing acting skills, and the black and white videography. And said coloration, or I guess lack thereof, is one of the first things you'll notice if you watch this movie, as it not only serves to separate scenes in the present from ones that took place years or even days ago, similar to what Better Call Saul did, but also causes part of the movie to almost feel like a horrific series of historical events. You see, the main character is the aforementioned Derek, an average young man who is sent down a rabbit hole of radicalization after the murder of his father, causing him to become infatuated with Adolf Hitler and his racist, right-wing, white supremacist ideology. He becomes the protege of a so-called white power author in the area named Cameron Alexander, transforming him into the leader of a violent gang of skinheads and reaffirming his conspiratorial belief that a race war is currently in progress in the United States. A war he intends to win. So having these scenes that feel like they're from historical events really harkens back to all the depictions of real racism and racial violence throughout American history that were photographed in black and white, as well as connects them to the modern era, showcasing how that sort of hate has continued through all this time. The lack of color could likewise be seen as an extension of Derek's worldview, one lacking nuance that reduces society to a primitive, everlasting conflict between white and black, good and evil. But beyond that, the first scene of this film is remarkable due to its inclusion of incredibly provocative imagery and content, having intense intercourse take place against the background of a massive Nazi flag, as well as juxtaposing that with shots of a child who will later come to know as Derek's younger brother Danny, trying to sleep peacefully, which immediately demonstrates how unsafe of an environment this is for the poor kid. We're then thrown into an unbelievably intense sequence of Derek attacking and killing a group of men who are attempting to steal his car, then turning and looking to Danny with a crazed look in his eye. And what an iconic and astonishing look that is. Derek's shaved head, repulsive swastika tattoo, and maddening gaze tells you so much about his character right off the bat. We're then put into the present, in which we're introduced to Danny's more than troubling situation at school, where he's chastised for writing a paper about Mein Kampf, which glorifies Adolf Hitler as a civil rights hero. Danny's actor does a great job in this scene, showcasing immediately how his nonchalant toughness is a very hollow exterior, and we can already start to see how, on the inside, he's a weakened, hurt young man who seeks to glorify an equally broken individual, his brother. Expanding upon this further, we're shown a tape of Derek being interviewed on the local news after his father was murdered by a drug dealer. Derek goes on a sobbing, heartbreaking rant lambasting minorities and pushing the blame for what's happened to him on entire millions of people, which just goes to convey his emotional insecurity. At this point, some of the major themes of the movie become clear, which just goes to show how strong the pacing and writing are. We can see the flaws in these characters due to their nuanced performances and small clues from the scenes that break away from the suffocating amount of subjectivity that's present in the early stages of the movie, such as the aforementioned interview tape or the discussion between Danny's principal Dr. Sweeney and his English teacher. This dialogue scene presents a conflict in handling Danny's behavior and by extension this type of extremism as a whole. While Sweeney still thinks he can save and help Danny, the English teacher reacts with emotional outrage and rejects a more lenient approach. Both of these are understandable, but throughout the course of the movie it becomes clear which one is more effective in actually improving the world and the people within it. I already said that the movie starts off with a lot of subjectivity, which can be easily seen in the sequence of Derek playing basketball against a group of young black men, which utilizes kinetic cinematography and rousing music to show just how Danny views his brother, as a hero. Meanwhile, the introduction of Seth, who's essentially the most repulsive caricature of a fat, piggish white supremacist you could imagine, reveals how this glorification is all just a weak facade. Another major theme of the film also gets shown off here, which is the use of more mild rhetoric causing a domino effect into extremism. Here it's shown with how more mainstream mentions of despising Democrats or thinking that it's cool to be black now are so naturally mixed in with the toxic and radical dehumanization of minorities. However, the scene that really solidifies the efficacy of this theme comes much later in the film's runtime. And I'm not joking around when I say this movie efficiently introduces ideas and capitalizes on them perfectly, as yet another noticeable detail is how truly awful the living conditions of the family are. When Derek returns, even he's shocked at how cramped and dire things seem, especially with his mother being terribly sick. This brings a lot of context to the development of his brother's radical ideas. And while the Derek in the present has recently got out of prison for the murder he committed in the opening scene and seems far more mild and cool-headed, this really contrasts with the next flashback, which shows the old skinhead version of Derek giving a speech that riles up a whole group of other skinheads to attack a supermarket simply because it's owned by a Korean man and has immigrant employees. His speech is where we really start to see the movie's messaging about where this sort of rhetoric and ideology comes from, as he laments the terrible living conditions of poor white Americans and seeks to blame it on the presence of immigrants and minorities, rather than acknowledging systems of inequality or oppression that cause both of those groups to suffer, in turn falling for the ruling class's greatest trap. The film certainly takes advantage of the speech, using it to launch us into a horrifying and hard-to-watch sequence of them attacking the employees of the supermarket with brutal, cruel assaults that are carried over to the audience by the lingering close-ups, frantically panning action shots, and intense audio of the thugs' horrific, racist chants. In particular, the way that they treat this one cashier, pouring all sorts of products on her face and essentially waterboarding her with them, is so absolutely mean-spirited and inhumane that I can't bear but to get repulsed and upset while watching it. The movie never slows down its amazing pacing too much, jumping from unforgettably disturbing sequences like this one to meaningful dialogues like the next. All the while, the themes and characters are kept in mind and are constructed upon by every detail in every scene. It's perfect. The movie is under 2 hours and gets so many ideas across so well. That's impressive. Next up is the scene that I actually saw on YouTube that made me interested in the movie, which is an extended sequence of Derek and his family as well as Danny's English teacher, who at the time dated their mother for a short period, discussing the current racial situation in America with a particular focus on Rodney King. There's a ton to unpack in this scene, from the way that Derek's sister and the English teacher both offer very intellectual and reasonable explanations for multiple issues, yet are ignored and shouted over with simple-minded conspiracies, to the fact that Derek tries to justify Rodney King's assault by mentioning his criminal record, which remains incredibly relevant today, considering how many people use the same appeal with regard to the murder of George Floyd. It's also just beautifully ironic how Derek complains about thugs looting and rioting in stores in the wake of the Rodney King situation, when he ends up literally rioting in a store and assaulting multiple innocent people for a truly ridiculous reason. This scene really is one of the absolute best depictions in fictional media of how this sort of ideology is developed into someone's mind, and how it manifests into logical fallacies, irrational arguments, and conspiracy theories. For example, Derek also attempts to base his argument on the hypothetical of Rodney King running over an innocent child, then attempting to connect it to a personal and emotional situation by comparing this imaginary child to Danny, showing how he's living in a fictitious non-reality, and attempting to convince his family members to join him in it, rather than presenting any real, truthful points. And finally, when his family members still reject his ideas and refuse to join in his delusion, he lashes out, attempting to exert control and authority over his sister, and eventually, in another horrific and unforgettable moment, assaults and abuses her, causing a physical conflict with the whole family, which eventually culminates in his mother delivering one of the most devastating lines I've ever heard in a movie.
Aren't you ashamed?
I'm ashamed that you came out of my body.
He claims to want to protect his family and community, but as soon as the way he wants to do that isn't accepted, he reveals himself as the true poison. At this stage in the film, we're shown a contrast between Derek's previous rage and his current rationale, with the absolutely stomach-churning curb stomp scene being an absolute horror show, and not the fun kind, which immediately differentiates itself from the following moments of Derek talking calmly and expressing himself in a reasonable way. Just look at this shot of Derek's devilish smile burning his ideology into Danny's impressionable mind before he's sent off to prison, and compare it to him sitting and trying to reason with his unhinged girlfriend later on. It's night and day. This sequence of a neo-Nazi rock party at Cameron Alexander's house is a true cinematic achievement, representing the dark underbelly of American society and showcasing the full fruits of Cameron's twisted operation, which is expanded upon in the following scene of Derek explaining that he no longer wants any part in the community, which is rejected and eventually leads him to attack Cameron, much like he previously attacked innocent civilians in that disgusting man's name. It also shows how terrifyingly close Danny is to the skinheads, reinforcing Derek's need to save his brother from going down the same path that he did before it's too late. In the last part of the movie, Derek explains to Danny via a series of flashbacks just what happened to him in prison, and this is where the movie really solidifies itself as a required viewing experience, displaying the horrors of the prison system and granting us some of the best character development out there. Derek's forced to do menial prison labor, that is, fold laundry, with a black man, which at first is incredibly awkward, but over the course of various interactions and Derek's increased ostracization among all the other prisoners, even fellow neo-Nazis, he grows to actually accept what he would have previously seen as an inhuman enemy. It's done really well and believably, which is a huge relief as this character change really is the make or break moment for the movie, and they totally make it by totally breaking Derek's character from the inside out. Not only are the subtle developments in the scenes of him folding laundry part of the success, such as him going from rushing through as much laundry as possible with a burning rage to slowing down and taking his time, but also all of the things that happen to him outside of it. The first big thing is that he speaks to his mother for the first time since the huge fight, and she explains to him the toll that not just this prison sentence, but Derek's entire lifestyle has had on the whole family, making it all clear with the simple line,
You think you're the only one doing time, Derek? You think you're here all alone? You think I'm not in here with you?
And of course, the big thing that really causes Derek to change is the shower scene. I can't show this on YouTube most likely, so I'll just tell you all about it face to face. So in this scene, Derek is jumped in the shower by a group of 6 neo-Nazis who he previously tried to befriend, but after they realized that he had become friends with the black guy that he folds laundry with, they decide to attack him, and one of them sexually assaults him in the shower. This is easily one of, if not the most disturbing scene in any movie I've ever watched. And even though I kind of had a sneaking suspicion that something like this might happen, I didn't think they'd fully go through with it and show as much detail as they did. The ensuing shots of Derek lying on the floor, broken and beaten with blood flowing down the drain and his white power tattoo serving as nothing but irony, are a truly artistic showcase of everything we've seen up to this point. And then comes the kicker. Sweeney visits him in the infirmary and tells him that Danny is going down the same path that he did, causing him to realize that the world he's built for himself has only brought him and others more misery and pain than ever before. He's built a hole of rage and fury that he may never escape from. He has become white powerless.
Has anything you've done made your life better?
Additionally, the dialogue where he realizes that the black guy got 6 years in jail for stealing a TV, whereas he only got 3 for literally shooting someone in the face and curb stomping another, makes him realize that maybe, just maybe, the logical explanations that his sister and English teacher provided were believable after all. His goodbye to that guy at the end of the prison sentence is a beautiful scene showing how much he's grown and changed and capping off, in my opinion, the best part of the movie.
How did I buy into this shit, you know? It's just because I was pissed off. And nothing I ever did ever took that feeling away.
That says it all. The ending of the movie seems quite positive, with a powerful resolution of him saving his brother from making the same mistakes as they remove all the Nazi insignia from his walls, converting his room from a den of hate and anguish to a real childhood home. We're shown one last flashback of the family eating together when their dad was still alive, and his seemingly benign opposition to affirmative action and the inclusion of minority literature in his son's curriculum slowly results in the quiet, though shocking use of a slur, which ties back into the idea of more mild rhetoric expanding into dangerous beliefs. There are shots of the two brothers as children living peacefully and happily juxtaposed with the horrors of their current lives, of the world they've built out of sorrow and a desire for retribution. But in the end, there's hope for something new. they still have time left to turn things around. But then, out of nowhere, Danny is suddenly and horrifically shot and murdered by a young black schoolmate whom he previously feuded with, blasting the first and only instance of in-color blood in the film all over the wall and leaving me with my jaw on the floor. It seemed like things were going in the right direction, but life is rarely that simple. We're shown Derek devastatingly mourning and holding his brother's corpse, as beautiful shots of the beach and Danny's voice reading his redone essay, at the end of which he quotes Abraham Lincoln's inauguration speech, close the film. When I first watched this movie, I was kind of confused by the curveball this ending gave me, but as I thought about it more, I realized what they were going for, and I think it's even more effective than if they went for a simple, optimistic finale. First, it's a subversion of our expectations, as there's talk of Derek being killed by his previous neo-Nazi associates, and yet it's his brother who ends up being killed instead. Second, it shows that Derek getting out and trying to save his brother was a noble attempt, but just happened too late, and that's the bleak reality of the matter. Finally, it showcases the perpetuation of violence between two parties, both of whom are troubled and misguided, and how, in the end, if we can't overcome the institutional failures that push so many people into the deepest abscesses of our society, we will continue to be a failed, violent society in which children murder one another. It's great that Derek grew and changed, and it would have been great if Danny did the same, but sadly, that's just another brick in the wall. It doesn't matter what happens on an individual level if we continue to operate our society in such a divisive way, where people are pitted against one another while only the most powerful stand to benefit. In that case, this cycle of suffering will never end, and Derek was just one of the lucky few.
Sorry that happened to you.
No, I'm not. I'm lucky.
American History X serves as an amazing reminder of the failings of our society, as well as an introspective look into a fascinatingly realistic, terrifying, and somehow also inspiring character. But while it does show the beauty of how individuals can change, it turns our heads away from that comforting, cherry-picked truth and forces us to look at the broader picture of inequality and violence. It is nothing short of a masterful movie, and I give it an easy 5 out of 5.